Okay, thank you. We'll call this meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions for the fiscal year ending March 31, 2024. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table when it comes to your turn.
Thank you.
We'll do that as we go around the table. And my name is Glenn Van Dyken. I am the MLA for Athabasca Barrhead Westlock and the chair of this committee. We will begin starting to my right.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Tracy Allard, MLA for Grand Prairie.
Hello, it's Garth Roswell, MLA, Vermilion, Lloydminster, Wainwright.
Evening, everyone. Cyril Turton, MLA for Stony Plain, Spruce Grove.
Rick McIver, the MLA from Calgary Hayes.
Good evening. Jordan Walker, the MLA for Sherwood Park.
Jason Stefan, MLA for Red Deer South.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Casey Madu, Minister of Skilled Trade and Professions, and with me this evening are my Deputy Minister Bevier, ADM Mike Fernandez, and ADM SFO Olin Lovely.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Egan. I'm the MLA for Edmonton Northwest.
And good evening, everyone. Christina Gray, MLA for Edmonton Millwoods.
Good. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. We have Mr. Turton for the Honorable Mrs. Armstrong-Omaniak. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to turn your camera on while speaking and mute your microphone when not speaking. Remote participants who wish to be placed on a speakers list are asked to email or message to the committee clerk, and members in the room should signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honorable members, the standing orders set out the process for consideration of the main estimates. A total of 3 hours has been scheduled for consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions. Standing Order 59, Section 1, Subsection 6, establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the minister or member of Executive Council acting on the minister's behalf will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of the minister's comments, a 60-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for independent members, if any, and then a 20-minute speaking block for the government caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but speaking times may be combined between the member and the minister. After this, speaking times will follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent members, and the government caucus. The member and the minister may each speak once for a maximum of 5 minutes, or these times may be combined, making it a 10-minute block. If members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having the break? Ministry officials may be present at the direction of the minister, may address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to a microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the speaking block and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on the estimates and any amendments will occur in Committee of Supply on March 16, 2023. Amendments must be in writing and approved by Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting at which they are to be moved. The original amendment is to be deposited with the committee clerk with 20 hard copies. An electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to committee members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimates debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. I would now invite the Minister of Skilled Trades and Professions to begin with your opening remarks. Minister, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, colleagues, once again. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about skilled trades and professions and the 2023-24 budget. Let me once again introduce my Deputy Minister Bevier, Assistant Deputy Minister Mike Fernandez, and Assistant Deputy Minister Chief Senior Financial Officer Olin Lovely. Budget 23 allocates $219 million for skilled trades and professions. This is a 9% increase, which allows the ministry to provide stable, multi-year funding to key partners and programs. It provides flexibility for us to consult with partners and target funding to address labor market demands. Alberta has apprenticeship education programs in 47 trades. At the end of 2021, there were approximately 39,000 registered apprentices learning on the job at more than 10,000 employer sites around Alberta. Approximately 6,600 journey persons were certified in 2021. Despite this impressive number, several key Alberta industries are experiencing acute labor shortages. Budget 23 invests $68.9 million to advance apprenticeship education. I am pleased to say that the new apprenticeship registration has increased from 7,820 in 2020 to more than 13,000 in 2022. In the current school year, 11 post-secondary institutions across Alberta have approximately 22,000 seats for apprenticeship classroom instruction. The Apprenticeship Learning Grant helps these institutions fund classroom instruction. Budget 23 adds $15 million over 3 years, $5 million per year for the Apprenticeship Learning Grant, which translates to more than 1,000 new apprenticeship seats. The 2023 budget invests $10.3 million over 3 years for innovative pathways into apprenticeship programs. These pathways will help Albertans already employed in the trades to elevate their skills and promote these career options to underrepresented Albertans. My ministry maintains vital partnership with community organizations to promote apprenticeship education and encourage young people, women, indigenous people, and unemployed Albertans to consider apprenticeship programs. Budget 23 provides support for 3 long-standing key partners: Careers The Next Generation, Women Building Futures, and Skills Canada, Alberta. Careers Next Generation facilitates paid internships for high school students, including in the registered apprenticeship program. Women Building Futures helps unemployed and underemployed women explore careers in the skilled trades. Skills Canada, Alberta promotes skilled trade and technology careers as first option for youth. My ministry will also be seeking partners to promote apprenticeship-related services to Indigenous learners, to increase the number of Indigenous apprentices, the number of seats available for pre-apprenticeship programming, and to create new partnerships between employers and Indigenous communities. Budget 23 also includes funding for partnership with cultural communities. Ensuring newcomers have access to learning support is something I am passionate about, and I am pleased to see more support in this area. Budget 23 includes $102.4 million for foundational learning assistance. This is an additional $5.8 million per year for adult learning opportunities that allow Albertans to upskill and reskill for jobs with labor market demand. This increase will assist program students to deal with inflationary pressures on living costs, tuition, supplies, transportation, and childcare. Currently, in Alberta, 1 in 5 adults faces daily literacy and numeracy challenges, which can severely affect their ability to make informed life decisions. The Community Adult Learning Program funds 80 organizations, 7 urban, rural, remote, and indigenous communities to support foundational learning. These can include literacy and numeracy programs, skills for learning basic digital skills, and English language learning. Budget 23 adds $1.5 million over 3 years to support community adult learning programs across Alberta. Demand continues to increase in part due to the arrival of thousands of Ukrainian newcomers. In response to recommendations from the Premier's Advisory Task Force on Ukraine, Budget 23 directs $1.1 million in new English language funding for Ukrainians. Language education helps Ukrainian temporary residents to find stability and opportunity. Many of them are highly skilled professionals who can help meet Alberta's labor needs. The government of Alberta passed the Labour Mobility Act in 2021 to support the seamless movement of out-of-province certified workers to Alberta. The Labour Mobility Act is currently in approvals. Once approved, it will be proclaimed and come into force. Budget 23 allocates $170,000 to complete the regulation. Proclaim the act and see the framework come into effect. Budget 23 also ensures skilled trade and professions can continue reducing barriers to credential recognition for skilled professionals from around the world. Recognizing newcomers' credentials in a timely fashion is key to our plan to grow and diversify Alberta's economy. We have a focused team working with our professional regulatory partners to create a more efficient system. Skilled Trade and Professions 2023 budget support a robust, effective, and competitive workforce, and the goal of transforming the adult learning system to provide high-quality education, skills, and training for Alberta's future. Mr. Chair, I am excited to see the positive impact of Budget 2023 and to lead the exciting work ahead. Our partners are counting on the government of Alberta to ensure that the skilled workforce we need for today and for tomorrow are going to be there for them. With that, Mr. Chair and colleagues, I want to thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. For the hour that follows, members of the official opposition and the Minister may speak. Honorable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Members, would you like to combine your time with the Minister's time?
Yes, please.
Minister, would combine time or block?
Block time.
Block time?
Yeah.
Okay, Member Egan, you have up to 10 minutes to speak in a block.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your introductory comments. And I must say that this is kind of a unique circumstance for me because, of course, we're doing budget estimates for a new ministry. And so, well, we quite often, just to give you some trade secrets how to do this, right? We go back and see where there's been cuts made and changes and so forth, but this is all fresh ground. And so, you know, I seek always to be constructively critical and look for more information because, of course, not just ourselves, but our partners in post-secondary institutions and the trades and the workforce, and industry, employers in general. Everyone's interested to see where we could go to make this the most effective to ensure that we're building a workforce for now and for the future for this province. And so my first set of questions are referring to the business plan. So I will give you page numbers to go with that, and then we can work with that. And I've actually not done block time for a long time because my advanced education minister, we have a conversation, so I can always stop and then pass it on to him whenever you lose the time, though. Okay, so don't do that. Okay, so there's someone, it's like that voice in my head that's telling me, okay, I won't do that, Lord knows. So if you can look to the business plan then, to page 122, key objective 1.1. And there is, I quote, to create a modern, flexible and efficient skilled trade certification and apprenticeship education system in Alberta, unquote. So clearly, based on the success of polytechnics such as NAIT and SAIT, finding employment for their graduates in the trades, and the close partnership these institutions have with employers and trade unions throughout the province to ensure standards of practice and accurate projections of how many apprenticeships Alberta is likely to need from year to year. So with that fairly successful formula that's been used for a number of years, where you see more than 95% employment rate in different trades in NAIT and SAIT and so forth, what changes or modernizations are you planning for the existing apprenticeship programs in the province? Because, of course, as I say, I would say not just my assessment, but the assessment of the institutions, of students, of employers and whatnot, the way by which they determine, let's say, how many pipe fitters you need for the year, they will determine that. And with a high degree of accuracy, they're usually quite successful. So if there's changes you want to make to that or that formula, I would be very curious. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen with that. Further to the business plan, again, page 122, objective 1.4, says that you would like to, and I quote, expand the apprenticeship model to increase learning opportunities to meet labor market demands, unquote. And so I would like to know, first of all, and others as well, what new apprenticeship programs are you currently pursuing in your ministry? Are you working with our post-secondary institutions and advanced education to flesh out what these initiatives are and what they will look like? Because, I speak to colleges, universities, and polytechnics all the time, and they have not specifically mentioned, their interactions with your ministry, but rather the Ministry of Advanced Education, which is fair because you're new so far. In advanced education estimates, which we completed last week, there was plenty discussion about the trades and apprenticeships, but very little mention of a separate ministry and what it actually is going to do in terms of picking new apprenticeship programs. And I would just to add a further thing around that. I mean, we know that the apprenticeship programs that are most successful here in the province and indeed across the country and across North America, of course, it brings people in and they're interested in participating because they get to be paid as they are in various years of their apprenticeship. If you're, again, a plumber and a pipe fitter, yes, you spend time at school in NAIT or SAIT or other places, but then you also are going out into the field for extended apprenticeship training, and you're getting paid for that at the same time. So as you build these new apprenticeships, I'm curious to know if you're willing and able and understand that the success largely depends on, making it affordable, and making it affordable by paying apprentices to do their work experience element of their training. So I think that's an important thing to consider as well. again, you can see how I went through and made these questions. With the business plan again on page 122, I see that, expanding the apprenticeship concept is is good, but only if there's carefully thought out programs that you're considering. And so I'm, just want to make sure that you are working through this every step of the way, not just to say, well, this is where we need the jobs in the next couple of years, but also looking for different choices that you can give students, for them to pursue what they think they're interested in and what they think will be an employable skill in the future. Also, I guess that has to do with consultation, right? So just to make sure that as we expand the apprenticeship program, which we support wholeheartedly, that it is a substantive consultation that is flexible and organic in nature. And so, we just don't want people in Edmonton making decisions in government, what they think the jobs of the future are going to be, when in fact maybe they're wrong, right? I mean, we trained an awful lot of geophysicists in the last 15 or 20 years, and for a long time that was the way to explore for oil properly, and everybody got a job. And then suddenly the geophysics market for workers just dropped out, it bottomed out. And so, we just don't want to be left with being 5 years behind in what emerging apprenticeships should be. And then maybe I can squeeze one more question in here as well. Again, on page 122 of the business plan, objective 1.2 says to advocate for and champion skilled trades and professions, as a pathway that will lead to rewarding careers. And the most important was to create a desirable pathway to ensure a trades education, or really for any education for that matter, is to make sure that it's affordable and will not burden a student with excessive debt after they graduate. Your ministry, together with advanced education, must ensure that tuition and other fees are affordable, right? And so my question is that first part anyway, is the 2% gap, the tuition that the advanced education just announced, does that also apply to skilled trades and professions? Will it also apply to extra instructional fees? And will institutions be backfilled for the reduced tuition income that they might lose and otherwise be forced into making cuts in other areas to make up for this loss of income? And I've just talked to both Nate and Sate to prepare for these budget deliberations, and both of them said that while they want tuition to be affordable, they need to make sure that they know that if it's a 2% cap and their inflationary costs are 4 or 3, 5 or 6%, that you will backfill the difference so that they simply just don't have to pass those off into other areas to make cuts. You know what I mean? Because this is a common criticism of putting caps in place, that you can't just make a cap. You also need to backfill it in the institutions so that they're not just compelled to make cuts in other areas. Certainly, that our Alberta New Democrat government would make sure that tuition is affordable and that everyone who chooses to go to a post-secondary education or training or trades will have a space to do so, and it'll be the highest quality, and it will be consistent. That's really what students and schools and teachers and everyone in Alberta is looking right now, is to have reliability in our post-secondary institutions and trades and skilled professions, so that certainty can be passed on for their ability to make plans for themselves and for their families. And certainly, as New Democrats, hopefully to form the next government, we will do that.
Thank you, MLA Hagan. Minister, you have up to 10 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Egan, for your questions. I think I got about 4 or 5 questions out of you. So let me begin with your first point. As you know, Member, in July of 2022, we passed the Skilled Trade and Apprenticeship Education Act, otherwise known as STAIR. And that act replaced the 30-year-old Apprenticeship and Industry Training Act. That was a major modernization that was brought into being by government in 2022. The act is intended to accomplish the following. Number one, enable the Alberta government to be more flexible and quickly respond to the changing needs of students, industry, employers, and educators. Number two, it expands apprenticeship education to other professions and high-demand occupations. Number three, it eliminates a significant amount of red tape for government, educators, and industry, clearing the way to provide education and training that is efficient and meaningful. Number four, it encourages more Albertans to pursue trades, professions as a valuable and meaningful career. It reinforces that skilled trades are important, respected, well-paying, and in-demand occupation. And lastly, it allows industry more flexibility in how apprentices are trained. But there are a few signature part of that particular legislation. Under STAIR, Mr. Egan, a new education credential is awarded to apprenticeship education program graduates, along with a journey person certificate. The education credential is separate from the journey person credential and is a formal acknowledgement that a person has completed a post-secondary program of study. The journey person certificate also recognizes that someone is a skilled professional who has met the certification standard and is authorized to work in the trade anywhere in Alberta. There are 4 levels of education credentials that will be awarded, depending on the length and complexity of the program. Number 1, advanced diploma, certificate, and certificate achievement. So this model brings apprenticeship in line with other post-secondary education programs and regulated professions in Alberta, where an academic credential is separate from the license to work. Education credentials can help employers, even those outside of the trade, understand the level of education someone has achieved. And finally, education credentials can also open doors to further education, and as post-secondary institutions may award credit toward other relevant post-secondary programs based on the education credentials. Now, you also, with respect to your second question, I think it deals with mostly new industry pathways. So, Skilled Trade and Professions did launch the Industry Pathways Initiative, which provides a framework for the department to work with Alberta industry groups to explore adopting the apprenticeship learning model and or trade designation to support workforce development or regulation needs. This initiative was made possible by the legal separation of apprenticeship and the trade regulation introduced by STAIR. I would note that work is still ongoing to strengthen the on-the-job instruction through mentorship. The formal mentor role was introduced by STAIR. STAIR replaces supervision and mentorship to strengthen the on-the-job learning component. Now, your third question deals with whether or not we are working with advanced education and indeed other post-secondary institutions to make sure that these program implementations are implemented in a way that buys their support. And the short answer is yes. We have been consulting with all of the 11 post-secondary institutions that we are responsible for: Keano College, Lakeland College, Lethbridge College, Medicine Hat College, Northern Lakes College, Olds College, Portage College, NATE, Northwestern Polytechnic, Red Deer Polytechnic, and SAIT. All of that work is ongoing, and we intend to continue to do so. In budget 2022-2023, all of those institutions were funded. Keano College, for example, was $745,000, Lakeland $778,000, Lethbridge College $1.5 million, Medicine Hat College, $953,000. Northern Lakes, $569,000. Oates College, $612,000. Potage College, $319,000. NAIT, $12 million plus, more than $12 million. Northwestern Polytechnic, more than $2 million. Red Deer Polytechnic, more than $2 million. SAIT, more than $11 million. And so that work continues, and I continue to look forward, to work with them to make sure that we are all aligned. Your last question deals with how do we deal with making sure that post-secondary education is affordable and in a way that allows students to be able to have a good education without the pressure that comes from post-secondary institutions and tuitions and things like that. Advanced education obviously provides base operating grant and apprenticeship learning grant. And so Minister Nicolaides has been working diligently with post-secondary institutions across the province to make sure that the needs of students in terms of what they need are well taken care of. Post-secondary institutions who have apprenticeship programming get base operational funding from advanced education to support instruction, academic support, student services, operations, institutional support, and so on. The skilled trade and professions also provide apprenticeship learning grant funding, formerly known as apprenticeship technical training grant, to support our post-secondary partners, our apprenticeship program development and delivery. We will continue. There is no question that from time to time there will be pressure. Myself and advanced education will continue to monitor those pressures to see whether or not there is need for interventions within the fiscal year. But as you know, the budget cycle is a 1 year cycle, oftentimes 3 year cycle. If there is need for us, if there's anything that was missing in this particular budget, obviously we will have to deal with that in the next year's budget.
Good. Thank you, Minister. MLA Egan or MLA Gray, you may proceed for 10 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, and to the department officials who are here. I'm jumping in because I wanted to also ask about Objective 1.1 on page 122, the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act changes that the Minister already referenced a little bit in their comments, the changes coming into effect July 2022. And they were very big changes that specifically, as part of that, when it comes to skilled trades, removed the Alberta Apprenticeship and Industry Training Board and replaced it with the Alberta Board of Skilled Trades. Now, the Alberta Board of Skilled Trades mandate includes a few different things, but it also, in particular, it includes specifying the scope of activities in designated trades and establishing standards and requirements for designated trade certificates. And the Minister would be aware from the debate on Bill 67 that the new board and its mandate was of particular concern because of the potential impact on designated trade certification. And so when I go to the Alberta Board of Skilled Trades website now, I have to say that when I compare it to what the AIT board was putting out, there's a complete lack of information. AIT used to post meeting minutes. There was an annual report. Now, the new board hasn't had a year yet, so I wouldn't expect an annual report yet. But there are no meeting minutes. They've posted a single newsletter that was posted in August of 2022. In that newsletter, they committed to regular newsletters, but there's only been the one. In that newsletter, they talk about a public feedback survey, but those results haven't been shared. They committed to publishing an engagement plan on the website by October 31st, 2022. That is not there. So it appears we've gone from a board that regularly provided updates and provided lots of information to one where I can't tell what's going on. Now, the good news, Minister, is that at their first meeting, the ABST signed a designated trade and certificate requirement board order to maintain the scope of practice status quo under Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Education Act. So not significantly changing the trades designations yet. Great. That's what a lot of our stakeholders were quite worried about, that the new board would come in and negatively impact trade certifications. But I'm concerned about the lack of transparency, that they have not shared what is happening at their meetings, what is the direction they're intending to go in. So one of my specific questions to you, Minister, is have you met with the board? Do you meet with the board regularly? What expectation do you set for the board for them to be transparent about the work they are doing? Because the changes that they will make have a wide-ranging potential impact if the board isn't getting it right. And of course, during the debate, we were concerned about making sure worker and trade worker input was there and available to the board. Because, as we know, every province has mandatory trade certifications. There was only a single province that didn't, BC, and they're bringing it back because having those mandatory trade certifications supports higher, more stable paying jobs, attracting more people into the trades, and improving the perception of the trades. So all very good reasons for this board to work transparently. And so I've taken a few minutes of this block. I'd like to cede the remainder of my time to my colleague for another one of his questions. And I hope to hear more from the minister about his expectations for this board and how more information will be communicated to the public.
Thank you.
I accept your seating.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, I mean, actually, further to that, I mean, another concern that I have, and others as well, is that when this board does start new apprenticeship programs or starts to change the qualifications for existing trades, is that we maintain the continuity between not just what had been done before, but also to ensure that a trade is following the standard that is set on a Canadian level and on a North American level too, because many of these trades, like plumbers and pipe fitters or carpentry and so forth, they are part of an international organization that sets a standard, and so that an Alberta plumber and pipe fitter can go and work on a job in the southern United States with that same qualification and standard. And so when we are both making changes to existing trades and in fact starting new apprenticeships, is the Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions consulting with internationally, nationally and internationally, to ensure that they are lining up their apprenticeship standards with a standard that might already exist or is being built elsewhere? Question mark. Okay, so my questions, I wanted to pass back to talking about affordability again. And as we know that Alberta students graduate with more than 30% more debt than any other province in Canada, right? This is a misconception that I've heard for 3.5 or 4 years, right? That it's cheaper in Alberta, and then that's why we had to jack up the tuition. Well, in fact, people end up with more debt as an Alberta graduate than other provinces because of the granting system and all that kind of stuff. So with not matching student aid increases, and we want to attract students into the trades, it has to be made affordable for them to do so right now. So I want to ask what your ministry is doing to make a trade school education more expensive, or more affordable, not expensive, quite the opposite. And, for example, I was just talking to Nate today, and they've increased their tuition again for the next school year. It does not fall under that 2% cap that doesn't start till 2024-25. And so, time is of the essence. We need to make sure that trades are attractive and affordable right now. And further to that, in terms of budget, my next question is to do with workforces in our schools. And again, as a result of unprecedented cuts to polytechnics, colleges, the 11 colleges that you have described, there's been a significant loss of faculty and staff. Just using NATE, 230 job losses there, and 240 at SAIT, just as an example. It's impossible to increase enrollment in the trades when we do end up having to cut the workforce due to cuts to operational funding, and of course the workforce of the people who are actually delivering the education to through our schools. Your government, for example, is no longer providing the Campus Alberta grant information that documents how much each institute is receiving. I mean, we do get that information by dribs and drabs, but again, I would like to implore your ministry and your government to provide the Campus Alberta grant information in its entirety so that we can see that our trades, colleges, and polytechnics are getting the adequate funding that they that they need. My next question, maybe that's all I got time for, it looks like here. The institutions are being funded for their base commitment in apprenticeship seats, but last year and this year, there have been additional teaching seats without any additional funding. This is resulting in some very tight budgets, and for example, institutions are now resorting to replacing instructors with instructional assistants to make up for the funding shortfall, decreasing the quality of education that apprenticeship students will receive. Was this change in apprenticeship education delivery part of the ministry's plan? We see, this is again an example, Mr. Chair, of the operational funding grants being flatlining or being decreased, and institutions being compelled to look for savings wherever they can. But to lose, let's say, 20% of your instructional highest level instructors and have to replace them with instructional assistants, right? Over time, that erodes the quality of education that is being delivered in the classroom, and as a result, over time, can erode both the reputation and the integrity of the system as a whole. So certainly, we are here to make the trades strong, and we're here to offer these constructive engagements, and certainly we would make sure that schools are adequately funded, that tuition is affordable, and everyone in Alberta who wants to choose to take advanced an education, a trade, and so forth, would be able to do so.
Thank you, MLA Egan. Minister, you have up to 10 minutes to respond to questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member, for that question. So I think the first question that the member Gray asked was about the Alberta Board of Skilled Trade in the context of transparency. So there is no question. I have met with them, and I continue to meet with them as the need arises. In fact, last week I met with the board chair in my office. And from time to time, my deputy minister and ADM do meet with them as well. So as you know, this is a brand new board that was established in the summer of 2022. It's a board that is made up of 15 members. They have started functioning, but we are working with them to build up their board in terms of process, procedures, and things like that. I am not concerned about transparency because it's a brand new board with a defined mandate. And in Section 13 of the Skilled Trade and Apprenticeship Act, it states the minister shall appoint a board to be known as the Alberta Board of Skilled Trade, consisting of not more than 15 individuals who, in the opinion of the minister, are knowledgeable with respect to the contribution of skilled trade and all of that. But here are the function, the responsibility of the board. It makes recommendation to the minister respecting this designation of trade and designating restricted activities within a trade, consulting with industry regarding standard and requirement for certification in designated trades. It promotes the value of designated trade careers and certification and making board orders such as specifying the scope of activity that fall within the profession of a designated trade, establish standard and requirement for designated trade certification, and recognizing documents issued outside of Alberta as being the equivalent of an Alberta trade certification. Now, you know, so the mandate of the board is very clear, and I am looking forward to continuing to work with the board to ensure that they have the resources that they need to carry out their responsibilities. I am not concerned at this point in time because I don't see no concerns has been raised or flagged with me with respect to transparency with the board, and we are working with them, to make sure that their processes are going to be fully fleshed out and have the resources that they need to meet their responsibilities. STAIR established the Alberta Board of Skills, as I said before, and they do meet on a regular basis. And just last week, the chair, did confirm for me that they just met with the board to talk about some of their mandate items. The board is currently setting up its stakeholder and industry advisory systems. The board, their responsibility to advise the minister on a whole range of issues is well laid out. My ministry and the post-secondary institutions use the standards that are set by the board to develop apprenticeship education programs in our province. Now, your second question deals with support for students. So Alberta has many options to support apprentices as they return to classroom education. An extensive scholarship program that includes the Alexander Rutherford Scholarship, the Bright Featured Scholarship, and the High School Apprenticeship Scholarship support apprentices who have recently completed high school. In 2022, there were 681 Bright Features and High School Apprenticeship Scholarship were awarded. Now, so in budget 2023, we are investing $43.8 million over 3 years in direct support for organizations that promote apprenticeship and help students gain critical on-the-job experience. Funding for community partners such as Women Building Futures, Careers Next Generation, and Skills Canada Alberta help to promote and build awareness for skilled trade and professions and expand support for Albertans wanting to register into apprenticeship programs. Let me also say this, that the partners that we work with, they expose youth, women, and indigenous Albertans to skilled occupations and build connections to employers and paid on-the-job experience. My ministry is also investing more than $10 million over the next 3 years to develop innovative learning pathways that will expand support for Albertans wanting to register into apprenticeship programs and create more opportunities for those already employed in the trade to elevate their skills. I am very much committed in increasing awareness of the value of career in the skilled trade. Oftentimes, remember, you've heard about the doctrine of parity of esteem. We want to make sure that Albertans, our young people, see the value in apprenticeship education, that it is a field of study, a field of endeavor that they can go into, achieve a rewarding success, make sure that they have the skills, not just for today, but for the jobs of tomorrow. And I want to make sure that we will get to the point in short order where we can begin to see apprenticeship education at the same level as an academic degree or postgraduate degree, because the individuals that work in the trade, they build our province. Without them, it will be difficult for us to build anything in this particular province and country. The last point I want to make is scholarships. We do offer a lot of scholarships. More than 900 scholarships are available to apprentices every year, consisting of pre-apprenticeship scholarships, high school apprenticeship scholarships, an apprenticeship training scholarship. And the scholarship ranges from $1,000 to $2,000 and $1,500, depending on the apprenticeship scholarship in question. Alberta also offers Alberta Student Loans Grant, a true advanced education. So Alberta Student Aid provides provincial loans and grants to apprentices registered in the Alberta Apprenticeship Program and attending an approved classroom instruction period as a full-time student. In 2021-2022, the average student loan and grant amount awarded to apprentices was $5,622,000 compared to $23,969 for other post-secondary certificate students and $23,955 for other post-secondary diploma students. There are also federal support that sometimes comes in to help. Now, the next question that you asked got to do with Campus Alberta. Well, I think what happened here is, as you know, Member Egan, the Alberta-based operating grant replaced the Campus Alberta grant. So the grant, it's still there. Post-secondary institutions who have apprenticeship programming, they still do get base operational funding from advanced education to support instruction, academic support, student services, operations and institutional support, and so on. So that funding is still there. It's just a change in nomenclature. But to your other question is what happens? You talk about the fact that some of the teaching spots have increased without additional support. You alluded to the idea of operational funding, being cut. Again, whilst I can't speak to items that are specifically within that of advanced education, what I can say is both advanced education and my department do offer in-year increases. Like as I said in my earlier remarks, we do monitor pressures. For example, in 2023, we allocated additional funding as a consequence of pressures to Northwestern Polytechnics in the amount of $341,800, and said we awarded an additional $1 million, almost $1.4 million to deal with the in-year pressures. So from time to time, we do see pressures, and the department must be flexible to make sure that the funding are there for them.
Minutes of question.
Thank you. And so just touching again on the Alberta Board of Skilled Trades Minister, I am raising concerns that there is not enough information about what the board is doing. The AIT board had meeting minutes, frequent updates, and here we have a board that's been operating since July of 2022 that has issued a single newsletter. And I'm asking you in your role as minister to work with the board to increase the communications to the thousands of people who can and will be impacted by the work the board is doing, especially after the debate that we had on Bill 67 and all the questions where the government essentially said, trust us, we will do great things. And now you've gone away, and this board has gone away into a black box, and you're saying, I'm not concerned about transparency. They met with me last week. That doesn't help anyone else, Minister. So I am asking for your commitment that you will help to have more newsletters published or something, like just some insight into how is the board thinking? What are they planning to do? How are they gathering input? What were the results of this survey? What is the engagement plan that they originally said they were going to have in October 2022? When is that coming? With that said, I will switch topics to outcome 3 from the business plan objective 3.2. I'd like to just talk about the Fairness for Newcomers office, and to be honest, Mr. Mr. Chair, and through you to the minister, some of my concerns here are really similar to the concerns I had with the previous board, and that is not a lot of information being shared with the public about what is happening within this office. Because the Fairness for Newcomers office opened in March 2020, and essentially nothing has been published from them since the 2020 baseline questionnaire summary. And that baseline questionnaire summary went out and took self-reporting from the professional regulatory organizations that are under the legislation that is related to this, did not measure actual timelines. And in fact, the report even said timelines were not measured. Instead, we were asked if they were generally able to meet a 6-month target. And the same goes for the interim registration decisions. And so I'm concerned that we're not seeing any outcomes. And in fact, I will suggest that the business plan doesn't have a performance metric for this office, and perhaps that would be appropriate so that Albertans could measure what the work is that is happening here at the Fairness for Newcomers office. I'd like confirmation there are 3 staff at the Fairness for Newcomers office. It appears there's a Fair Registration Practices officer, an analyst, and an office administrator. In government estimates, line 2.3, it lists the budget of almost $1.2 million. On page 124, initiatives supporting key objectives, it said the ministry will allocate $486,000 to the Fairness for Newcomers office to implement the Fair Registrations Practices Act. I'd like to know a little bit more detail about what that money is being spent on. And I would love your help in identifying where the remainder is, because $486,000 for implementing the act out of that $1.2 million, 3 staff. The other piece I was able to find was the Alberta Triple Track Satellite Site Pilot Project, which was announced just a few weeks ago, listed as a budget of $200,000. So if you could break down the budget of the Fairness for Newcomers office a little bit, how the money is being spent. I note that you are hosting the Premier Summit for Fairness on Newcomers, a 2nd annual, I believe, this coming Friday. There's no agenda information available to the public. I'm curious, is that coming out of the $486,000 mentioned in the business plan? As well, are members of the official opposition able to attend your summit? Yes, okay. Thank you so much,
There was
Minister.
a public registration.
Okay, we're not going back and forth, but I appreciate the yes. And then the other question I have for the Fairness for Newcomers office in my set of questions. So I'm looking for a better breakdown of the money being spent, why this office hasn't published anything, because it genuinely leaves me with the impression that there's been no material change when it comes to newcomers, when it comes to the credential recognition process through our professional regulatory agencies. How would I know anything has been improved when there is no information other than the information that is on the websites repeating over and over that they cannot help individual cases, that they're only looking at systemic issues, and I can appreciate that, but for the many, many newcomers who live in my constituency of Edmonton Millwoods and contact my office, very hard for me to explain how this office is making their life better. Nothing I can point them to on the website, a baseline questionnaire that didn't actually measure anything, just took self-reported guesstimates, and a budget that is not clear, but I'm sure you will clarify that for me next. My other question around this office is, you have the power to collect information and to trigger audits under Section 10 sub 2 of the legislation. And so my question, and I'm wondering if these are happening or not, but have you initiated any of these audits which can help you to determine whether registration practices carried out by the regulatory body are transparent, objective, impartial, procedurally fair? As minister, you would be the person selecting the auditor. If you have triggered audits, and maybe this is a regular part of the work that's happening now, who are you choosing to be the auditor in these cases, and what kind of background do those auditors have for the work that they are doing? That would all be really helpful for me to better understand what's happening with the Fairness for Newcomers office. And with 3 minutes and 30 seconds left, I'm wondering if my colleague, the Honourable David Eggen, would like to ask a question.
Yes, I would, and thank you so much for your time. And I guess I just have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go to one of my stakeholder questions I had asked. I think this is from SATE, and they were curious to know what is the minister's plans for Alberta industry training and period exams moving forward past the pandemic. And just as a reminder that not all trades in the province of Alberta our Canadian Red Seal trades, some are actually designated occupations, and the government registers those apprentices and issues the government of Alberta journeyperson certification without exam periods. And so in those programs, there's no vetting of learning outcomes and objectives outside of the training faculties that do not issue those certifications. So they're just looking for clarity around those exams, and that would be a useful question for you to answer. I also have a question from Nate. They specifically said that there's $15 million in additional funding from the apprenticeship learning grant announced by yourself, the minister, last week. But is there additional ALG funding still available as in years past? And, I just received 10 minutes ago an email from a gentleman that he wanted to say that, dear MLA Gray-Egan, as a constituent of Minister Madhu, I am disappointed that the minister doesn't appear to be answering your questions. I also see he watched the estimates that I did on Thursday and felt that it was a lot more helpful. So we just wanted to mention that, if you can be more specific about your answers. He's watching, the voters are watching, and he would appreciate a specific answers to these questions. I suppose that he's probably a post-secondary stakeholder. Thank you.
Minister, you have up to 10 minutes to respond.
Thank you so much, Chair. And I'm going to go back to the comment made by Member Gray about the Alberta Board of Skilled Trade with respect to the need for more information and newsletters and things like that. As I indicated in my earlier remarks, this is a new board. We are working with them to establish their processes and to make sure that they are up to speed. And I think once they begin a fulsome work, you are going to see more information being put out there. It's something that I support, so stay tuned. Now, with respect to your question on the Fairness for Newcomers office, as you know, that is one office that I am very proud of the work that they do. They came into being as a result of the Fair Registration Practices Act that we put in place in the summer of 2019. One of the earliest pieces of legislation that we put in place to send a very strong signal that foreign trained professionals, that when they come to our province, that they have a reasonable time frame for the regulatory bodies to inform them what is required of them. And that work is ongoing because for me and for this government, it is not acceptable for many of the regulatory bodies to take as long as they want. Sometimes it takes 18 months, 24 months for foreign trained professionals to be informed of what the expectations are before they begin to make the actual transition to their chosen profession. That is one of the problems that the Fair Practices Registration is meant to accomplish. And so I am proud of the work, that piece of legislation. I am proud of the work that the Fairness for Newcomers office is doing. Now, the office obviously is very important. As I indicated before, it ensures that all qualified individuals applying to Alberta's regulatory bodies have access to equitable, timely, and streamlined registration process. The Fairness for Newcomers office works with regulatory bodies to streamline, simplify, and accelerate the assessment of qualifications by identifying ways Alberta's regulators can improve upon and speed up their existing registration processes for all individuals, whether domestically or internationally trained. This is done by ensuring registration processes meet requirements of the Act, such as requiring an interim registration decision to be provided within 6 months of receiving all information required from an applicant to make a decision, and having a regulatory bodies report on their registration and assessment practices to the minister. The Fairness for Newcomers Office collects data from more than 70 Alberta regulators on their credential recognition timelines and processes. This data informs work with regulators on reducing barriers and improving efficiency in the system. Now, analysis of 2021 registration data provided by Alberta regulators is underway. In December of 2021, the Fairness for Newcomers Office published the results on a 2020 baseline survey, wherein regulators self-reported their adherence to the Fair Registration Practices Act. Now, based on the responses to the 8 indicators as assessed, Alberta's regulators bodies are mainly compliant to the Act, with 59% indicating they meet the majority of the indicators, 33% reporting meeting all the indicators, and 8% meeting only a few of the indicators. And yet, I am not fully satisfied with some of these outcome. I want them to make sure that they are earning top scores when it comes to meeting the spirit and intention of the Act. I cannot tell you that, yes, we did authorize an audit of some of the professional regulatory bodies, and that audit is being conducted by Deloitte. There is an audit underway with respect to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta. There is an audit underway with the College of Registered Nurses of Alberta, with the College of Licensed Practical Nurses of Alberta, as well as APEGA. That audit with respect to these 4 regulatory bodies are ongoing, and I look forward to the report of the audit. Now, he also talked about staff within the Fairness for Newcomers Office, and I think you alluded to 3 staff. I want to correct that. There are 9 staff. So we have been beefing up that particular office because we believe in the work that office does. The office itself, the budget for that particular office is $1.1 million. That is for 9 FTEs. But in budget 2022-2023, the budget was $1.1 million. In budget 23-24, the same amount of money. Now you ask for what the budget is meant for. As I have indicated, salaries and benefits, it's about $1 million. Supplies and services about $126,000. And if you add that up, it gives you the total budget for the ministry. Now, Mr. Egan asked about some of the questions that he received from some of our PSIs. I think it was SAIT, talking about period exams. Now, as you know, the period exams, post-secondary institutions have a very strong system of evaluation. Industry also has a role to play as well in the evaluation, as they deliver 80% of their education. So industry 80%, PSI is 20%, altogether 100%. There was a decision following the passage of STAIR to suspend, and obviously during the pandemic, to suspend the period exams, so that the department can embark on a fulsome review of the period exam. And so I can report that review is coming to a conclusion, and I am waiting for my department to provide me their briefing and recommendations as to what the next step would be. But I can assure you that the period exam is something that is important to our PSIs, important to our students, important to our partners, and we are working with all of these individuals. We are consulting with them. And the Alberta Board of Skilled Trade is also having a conversation on this. So by the time that we get a sense of where industry, working with post-secondary institutions, and obviously those in the apprenticeship program and skilled trade, I would be in a much more better position to report on where we go next from there.
Thank you, Minister. Member Egan for
Sure,
up to
we
10,
can
well,
just,
up to
uh,
4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Okay, well, that works for me. I would like to talk about foundational learning. It's one of your biggest line items in your budget, and certainly, I mean, as so many of these things are, there's a strong overlap between advanced education, but I would suggest as well K to 12 education too, because of course we have to analyze carefully why and what circumstances are someone who requires foundational learning as an adult, and try to bring them up to speed, and then also to try to look for ways to, you know, ensure that we have less people in that position as adults, that we're pursuing literacy in other places in their lives. And so my first question is from your business plan, page 123, performance indicator 2.1. You say that you want to improve access and affordability and to support unrepresented groups. And so I would be curious for your ministry to describe those underrepresented groups of which you speak, and how many people have been identified as being requiring foundational learning assistance here in the province of Alberta. You have a number of how many people you have enrolled, but I'm curious if you've done speculation or research as to how many people are out there that require foundational learning supports, because, you know, chances are there's more, and we want to help them. My second question in regards to foundational learning is that support, you know, you say that you want to support Albertans to improve in literacy, numeracy, language. And so I'm curious to know if you have done an analysis of what level of education people who access foundational learning actually have. What percentage, for example, of that group has not completed their high school diploma? That would be a very important detail for us to pursue. And then further to that, has your ministry conferred with the Ministry of Education about how we can support students who are at risk of not completing their high school education? You know, maybe they are new English language learners, maybe they require special ed assistance and so forth. I mean, so all of these things, obviously, Mr. Chair, through you to the minister, are interrelated. If someone did not get the supports that they needed with, as a new Canadian, with English language training or special education for students, then of course they become adults that require foundational learning in order to get a trade, right? So it all kind of hooks together. So I'm asking if you have in fact made those connections between K to 12 education, have done an analysis of how many people are out there, and whether what steps are you going to take to reach out to the population that is not receiving foundational learning at this time, but does require that. And I don't know where we're at. I'm just going to stop and you can answer.
A minute and 30 seconds.
So yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, you can.
Okay, Minister, you have about a minute and 20 seconds to respond.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the member talked about, asked about foundational learning and how many people are receiving support. I can tell you that Budget 2023 provides an additional $17.5 million over 3 years for foundational learning, so that's a good thing. In terms of the statistics, as of February 1, 2023, approximately 9,900 Albertans had received foundational learning in 2022-23. This is a 20% increase from 21-22, when approximately 8,230 Albertans received foundational learning support. In terms of the demographics, 2022-23, the student demographics are as follows: 69% identify as female, 29% identify as male, 2% did not specify, 53% identify as non-immigrant, 47% identify as immigrant, 25% identify as indigenous person, and 8% identify as a person with disability. So in terms of, have we consulted with education on high school? From time to time, we have this conversation with.
Thank you, Minister. I hesitate to interject. That concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We will now move to Government Caucus for 20 minutes of questions from the members. MLA Turton, would you like to combine your time with the ministers?
No, actually, I prefer block. I like the nuanced
Okay.
answers from the minister.
Thank you. You
Excellent.
have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Minister, and for coming out here tonight. I know it's been a long budgetary process up to this point, as well to the rest of your team that helped support you, and just know that for many of the residents of Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, the work that you do is extremely valuable. My riding is, I would say, a blue-collar riding. We have a lot of tradespeople in my neck of the woods who worked out at the power plants where I spent many years on, and I'll be touching base on that, as well as the Atchison Industrial Park. So I come from a long history of tradesmen. Actually, I think I know many of my colleagues across the floor, they talked about the building trades and the impact that they have made here in Alberta. I know for myself, I'm a 24-year member of the building trades of Local 1325. You know, I've been on almost every industrial construction site and have seen men and women involved in the trades and the construction industry over many decades. And so I'll be touching base a little bit on that. I guess my first question to kind of kickstart the discussion here for tonight is really pertaining to the processing time for the regulatory bodies in terms of applicants that are applying to regulatory bodies. I know it's been told by many members of this government, including yourself, Minister, about wanting to cut red tape and wanting to make sure that we can deliver the work of the people in the most efficient and timely manner possible. And I know when I go through on performance metric 3A on page 124, it talks about that the period of time between 2019 and 2020 for first-time applicants actually dropped from 11 to 6 days. So I think that's an important message for Albertans to understand about how your ministry has continued to provide services in a timely and efficient manner. And so just wondering if you can maybe elaborate a little bit about how the ministry actually achieved this decrease, which is actually quite substantial. In terms of the other two questions I have, it really, as much as I would love to talk about apprenticeship programs and trades, I really want to zero in on two major questions that I have. And those two questions pertain to getting disenfranchised groups, individuals and groups of people that are currently outside of trades involved and active and being productive members of society. And the next question I have really has to involve the CAL program, and that's the Community Adult Learning Program. And as you know, Minister, I've actually heard you multiple times about agreeing and saying that financial and technological literacy is extremely important in these current times. I remember when I went through my own apprenticeship program in 1998, way back in the day. I might have had hair back then, but that's a different story. And seeing the types of technology, the drafting rulers at NATE that were being used to be able to get into the trades. I think it was a 65% average at the time, and which I was quite thankful for guys like myself. I wasn't one of those big-time academics in school, but I remember just the level of technology that they talked about to be able to get into the trades. And when you compare that to today, you compare that to, you need computer literacy. You need to be able to understand some more advanced math. I mean, trades is a complicated business. Some of the largest structures and oil projects and oil sands projects involve some pretty elaborate calculations, and it takes a certain amount of intelligence to be able to kind of figure it out. And so I know on the key objective 2.2, specifically on page 123 for the numerous people watching online, I know some members of the opposition were talking about some of those people watching, but I guess the first question I have is what specific targets or metrics will be used to measure progress on the Community Adult Learning Program? Again, back to my previous question about making sure as a government that we are actually delivering services to the government or to the people of Alberta in the most efficient and timely manner possible. And then I obviously just get a little bit of elaboration as well about these programs and initiatives under this Community Adult Learning Program. how it'll actually affect Albertans, how it'll actually get new people entering the workplace, maybe provide them access to skills and either hard or soft, and be able to allow them to be able to maybe move up the rank when it comes to being able to be involved with other types of occupations that maybe perhaps can provide a little bit better for their families. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is something that's actually pretty near and dear to my heart. And that really has to deal with women building futures. You know, in my 23 years being involved in 1325, I have to honestly say I have had the absolute pleasure to work with some absolutely incredible women tradesmen. And I have to say, honestly, even at this current occupation, this current part of my own journey, I have to say I work with some pretty incredible women here at the legislature as well. But I want to touch base specifically on two of them. And they both have different stories, and one is named Essie, and I was actually just working with her yesterday, on the weekend. We're chatting, and she's a wonderful young lady, 18 years old, and she's going through for heavy-duty mechanics. And I will say, I admit, I am not a mechanically minded individual. I'm a journeyman carpenter and scaffolder, and I'm proud of it. But when it comes to the mechanics, I'm definitely not there. And I remember asking her a question, why do you want to get into the trades? And I remember we're walking down the road and we passed by, actually by absolute fluke, a couple old-time trucks. I'm sure there's probably some members here that would probably appreciate it. And she started gushing about this Chevy engine, and you could just see the passion in her eyes and her voice about why being a tradeswoman was so important to her. And it was cool. She was telling me about vehicles and working with her hands, and that not everyone is cut out for maybe white-collar trades. And then she summed it up by saying, you know what, I'd also just want to make just as much money as the boys and show them who's boss. And I mean, Essie, it was just awesome to see another fantastic young lady entering blue-collar life. And the other one I just want to touch base on is a gal named Ronnie. And Ronnie, I worked with her in about 2003. And she was actually the last journeyman I worked with before I became a journeyman. And I was a third-year apprentice and trying to move up. And again, I remember those conversations. We're building a scaffold 175 feet up in the air at Genesee Power Plant in 2004. I can still point out the conversations and hearing her stories about, being a single mom and wanting to all of a sudden support her family, and she knew she couldn't cut it, being a waitress, and she wanted to get out there, and she was a single bread earner, and she wanted to really go out of her way to make sure that her kids absolutely had the best life possible. And right across Alberta, there are stories of women that are trying to get into the trades, and that's why women building futures, I think, is so important, because I know that in the budget, there was a 6.25% budget increase. It's on line 3.2 to everyone watching online, page 203. And I know for yourself, Minister, you've talked hard about how can we make blue-collar trades open and accessible to all. I mean, with my previous question with Kelp, getting people involved right from the start, providing those hard skills for them. But then also just with Women Building Future about, and I guess the question really comes down to is like how, with yourself, Minister, and some of your experience, like how is this government breaking down those gender-based barriers for skilled trade occupations that have been previously dominated by men? I remember, now as much as I appreciated Ronnie and for everything that she was teaching me back in 2004, I have to admit, even looking back, that Ronnie was the exception. She was a powerful woman, and she knew her stuff. I mean, no one could build a scaffold better than she could. But I mean, she was still a part of the minority. It was still a male-dominated trades. Now it's changed a lot. I talked with a lot of my old colleagues, and it's being much more inclusive. And I really think organizations like Women Building Futures are one of those organizations that are breaking down those barriers. Like when you talk to them and you go through, I know a couple times we have breakfast, I've visited them at their sites and at other the trade halls, and you listen to them, and story after story, it's like single moms kicking butt, showing those boys who's boss, and actually making a difference and really doing an absolutely fantastic job. And I remember even talking to an old foreman. He said, He says, you know what? I would rather give $1 million piece of equipment to a woman that was trained at Women Building Futures than some of these punk guys, because they'll trash the equipment. And at least those women know what they're doing, right? And they'll treat it with respect, right? And so, you know, they're fantastic, fantastic workers. So, Minister, I know this is a passion of yours. I want you to just maybe perhaps elaborate a little bit about some of the types of supports that we've been giving them, you know, and thank you very much for allowing me just to kind of share a little bit about my story during this block.
Good, thank you, MLA Turton. Minister, you have up to 10 minutes to respond.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, MLA Thornton. You are absolutely correct. You know, when you hear stories like this, and beginning now with your last question and comment there, you get to see why it is important that we do everything we can to knock down all kinds of barriers that face some folks, including women and underrepresented communities, indigenous communities, and those who have been out of employment for a long time, looking to get back to the workforce. You know, the reason why the Premier established a focused ministry called Skilled Trade and Professions is to make sure that we are laser focused on the need to knock down barriers, whether for women or for those who are coming to our province from within the country, who are seeking to come from Ontario, BC, Nova Scotia, to come to Alberta to practice their professions, their skills, and their careers, or those who are coming from overseas. You know, we, as a government, made 2 significant steps in 2019 and in 2021. You know, in 2019, we passed the Fair Registration Practices Act, a consequential piece of legislation. And then in 2021, we passed the Labor Mobility Act. And I can report that we are working now to complete the regulation under that particular act. A lot of good stuff coming there. But you know, MLA Thornton, let me take you back to your first question, which has to do with the work that we have done to drop the processing time from 9 days to 6 days. You know, and we are talking about the processing time for domestic applicants who apply to a regulatory body in Alberta, and that is significant. That's what we want to see happen. The whole reason why in our party's platform in 2019, there was a whole section called a Fairness for Newcomers Action Plan. That action plan then gave rise to the Fair Registration Practices Act and the Fairness for Newcomers Office. I would also note, for the benefit of these committee members, that for the first time in our province's history, we hosted the first ever Premier Summit on Fairness for Newcomers in February of 2022. I am proud and very pleased to report that in about a week from today, we will be back in Calgary to host the second ever Premier Summit on Fairness for Newcomers. That is what we want to see happen. We want to make sure that anyone, whether you come from within the country or whether you come from overseas to this province, that when you come here, you have a shot at your full potential. And I think that's what you are seeing with the work we began in 2019, seeing that assessment time dropping all the way from 11 days to 6 days. We do think we can do more, and that is the whole essence of the work that we are doing. And you are going to see a lot of good work when we finally proclaim the Labor Mobility Act and ensure that the regulations are in place, and so that if you have ever worked in BC, for example, or in Ontario, there's no reason why you should come here and start the process all over again. It doesn't make any sense. So that work is underway as we speak. Back to your second question, your second question has to do with what specific target or metrics will be used to measure progress on the Community Adult Learning Program, and how would the programs and initiative under Community Adult Learning Program impact Albertans? A great question, Emily Thompson. The Community Adult Learning Program ensures that adult learners have access to part-time, non-formal literacy and foundational opportunities like digital and life skills below the grade 10 level. Community Adult Learning Programs support rural, remote, and urban communities to meet learning needs and are often the only community-based provider that delivers face-to-face programs. Now, through stable, ongoing funding, Albertans will continue to have access to learning spaces across the province. The program ensures that adult learners can persist in learning skills that they can use in their everyday lives while having access to relevant and engaging learning opportunities. Adult learners also benefit from community and adult learning programs that are well connected to their community so they can learn close to home. Specific targets and metrics include the number of learners that have participated in CARP, literacy, and foundational opportunities. It also includes the number of hours of learning. Emily Thornton, in this budget, the Community Adult Learning Program provides $16 million in annual funding to support foundational learning opportunities and approximately $2 million in annual funding to support instructors' professional development to increase their capacity to deliver quality learning programs. And we look forward to continuing to re-examine this particular program in terms of what it might need in future. Now, coming on to your last question, that is a topic that is very close to my heart: women building futures. And you talked about the fact that there is a 6.25% funding increase, and that is important. As we hear from the two examples, of some of your colleagues, it is critically important that we do everything we can to knock down barriers. In fact, I met with one of the organizations that provided a apprenticeship program to mostly indigenous women. And they talked to me about how they have run into difficulties with some of their funding. And I had a conversation with the department on this, and we all agree that as our economy booms, Alberta's economy is booming right now. Employers are in need of workers, and we have a lot of women who are very much interested in the skilled trade, and oftentimes there are barriers. It is not just enough to say we have those seats available for them, but oftentimes there are obstacles, there are family circumstances, there are childcare, you name it, poverty and things like that. There oftentimes are prohibitive of them going into the skilled trade that they love so much. And so my department is looking into all of that in a comprehensive manner to make sure that we are knocking down those barriers so that those women can get into the skilled trade and achieve their full potential. This government recognizes that skilled trade historically have been male-dominated. There is no question about that, particularly in industrial and construction trade. As of December 2022, approximately 5,700 women were registered apprentices out of a cohort of 45,000. This is an increase of 13% over 2021, so we are trending in the right direction. We are trending in the right direction, even though I would like to see that number dramatically go up, but we are making progress. And since the Skilled Trade and Apprenticeship Education Act came into force in July of 2022, my department has been working with Alberta Board of Skilled Trade, Industry, and Post-Secondary Institutions to create a more flexible and efficient system. Evolving and modernizing a program with historic traditions takes focused effort and time. This government is very much committed, Emily Thornton, to making sure that we provide all of the support, all of the resources and funding to our key partners. And that's exactly why we have increased the funding for women building futures.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We have about 25 seconds left. MLA Turton, you wish to speak?
Oh, absolutely. I got another 6 questions actually I'd like to ask in 20 seconds. No. In 20 seconds. But no, I again just want to thank yourself, Minister, and thank you for the work obviously that you have done. And just know that there are Albertans watching, not just on TV, but on job sites all over this province that are thankful for the work that you are doing. So no, thank you very much for that. It is making a difference.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the government member's first block of questions. Now we move to 5 minutes of questions from the official opposition, followed by 5 minutes of response from the minister. Please remember, discussion should flow through the chair at all times, regardless of whether or not speaking time is combined. And after this block of questions, we will take our 5-minute break, so everybody is aware. MLA Gray,
Yes.
you're up.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank
First one is a relatively straightforward technical question. I hope you can explain it to me. On page 125 of the business plan, or page 6 of government estimates, the statement of operations shows revenue and expense, and then there's a line for interministry consolidation adjustment. That seems to show a reduction of $44 million to the ministry's budget. So from 218 it becomes 174. I just would like to understand what that consolidation line is. On page 6 of the government estimates, it shows a lot of the ministries have these decreases, and so is it adjusting down the government's budget entirely? Please, if you could help me to interpret that, I would appreciate your help. We have talked about the Board of Skilled Trades, and we've talked about the Fairness for Newcomers Office. The minister's answer on the audits was very helpful, and my quick follow-up question would just be, when do you expect the audits that are underway for the 4 agencies to be completed? And I ask this just in the context of a looming election. Is this something that's likely to carry through that, or I don't know how long an audit takes? So when do we expect to see that? Now, the minister has referenced the Labour Mobility Act a number of times, and certainly we all have seen the data that shows that reducing labour mobility barriers could significantly boost Alberta and Canada's economy by reducing labour mobility costs by $500 per person per year, and it could help attract workers to Alberta, increasing provincial GDP by as much as $2.8 billion. Improving the overall Canada credential recognition system could potentially increase the annual incomes of the people affected by an average of $15,000 to $20,000, in excess of $3 billion for those with out-of-province credentials. And so my question to the minister is, with the bill having passed in November 2021 and Section 27 having come into force December 2nd, 2021, but the majority of the bill having not yet been proclaimed, you've referenced a couple of times today that work is continuing and is in progress. When do you anticipate being able to proclaim this? And again, in the context of a looming election date, is this something you see happening before the election, that this work will be proclaimed? How much is left to do? Is there some way you can contextualize that for me? And then I think I had a sub. And then just the slightly related comment was just in the business plan, performance metric 3A, around average processing time for domestic applicants who apply to a regulatory body in Alberta. The numbers are obviously trailing right now, but they, even before the Labour Mobility Act comes into force, they're really good, it seems like. Now, these would be average, and so I'm just curious if the minister's anticipating metric 3A is going to significantly decrease once the Labour Mobility Act comes into force. I was just trying to connect those two goals as we go through this estimates process. Now, 1 minute. All right, I'm going to pick my question. The minister is formerly the Minister of Labour, and there are pieces of this ministry that come from Labour, and I was trying to map things out. And so in 2022, the Ministry of Labor had two operating expense lines, 2.4 labor attraction and retention, it had a $4 million budget, and 2.5 labor qualifications and mobility, which had a $9 million budget. The description for 2.4 in this year's budget and government estimates matches the description that was used for line 2.2. And so 2.2 in your budget, labor attraction, retention, and mobility, seems like it might be carrying over from labor, except the previous budget was 9 million for that line item. The other line item was 4 million, and your line item is $170,000. So I don't think that you've dropped $10 million out of labor attraction and retention, because it's a very important part of what the government does. But if you could help me to identify what work is happening under this line item in your ministry. It looks like an enormous reduction during a time when labor attraction is a priority, but I imagine the remainder of what used to be labor's lines 2.4 and 2.5 have gone somewhere else, or if you wouldn't mind unpacking that.
Okay, thank you, MLA Gray. Minister, you have 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to let my Assistant Deputy Minister, Senior Financial Officer, respond to the consolidation question. I think you referenced $44 million in reduction and things like that. Or if I can have Olin Lovely to respond to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we're doing the consolidation for the financial statements, we can't double count the money that goes into the post-secondary institutions, so that what you're seeing on that line is $40 million for apprenticeship and approximately $2 million that flows out to the PSIs, and all that money is accounted for on an accounting basis in advanced education. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Olin. Now, remember, your next question deals with when can we expect the audit on the 4 regulatory bodies to be completed. Now, as I indicated, that audit is being conducted by Deloitte. I mean, whilst I don't want to, give you a firm date, because obviously there are circumstances that may lead to them having to come back to us for an extension or something, or some delays in the process. But generally speaking, we expect the audit to be completed by March 31st of this year. And in April, we will then begin to work with the audited parties, the 4 regulatory bodies, to build out the actions that we expect to see from them, depending on the result of the audit. My sense is that by summer, if there are things that we need to follow up on, we should be able to report back on them where, for example, if we find that there is need for best practices from other jurisdictions, based on some of the recommendations coming from the audit, then we begin to have the conversation with the regulatory bodies at that point in time. Now, you also talked about the Labour Mobility Act and the regulation, given the fact that the act was passed in 2021 and it hasn't been proclaimed yet. As you know, COVID intervened. But there is a massive piece of important regulation that we have been working on and consulting with stakeholders. We want to make sure that stakeholders are in a comfortable place, so that when the act is proclaimed, they would have the opportunity for easy transition based on the expectations on the regulation. We expect one of the things that the regulation is meant to do is easy transition of a professional who is working within the province to come to Alberta. So we have been working with our stakeholders to make sure that they are ready for the implementation of the Labour Mobility Act. My sense is by the end of April, or before the end of April, we'll proclaim the act and it will take effect immediately. Now, on your last question, you talked about Metric 3A and it deals with out of province and in province. What that time frame, whether or not we expect to see a reduction in the amount of time for the assessment. That is the goal. The goal is we want to see continuous progress. And there is no question in my mind that continuous improvement is a goal that we all share, and I want to make sure that the professional regulatory bodies here in our province understand that they need to work with us and work with their members, new potential members, to make sure that there isn't undue delay in the assessment period, because when there is inordinate delays, it affects that particular applicant, and it's not just for them, it's their families, it's their self-esteem. And so I am very much committed in making sure that we not, as I said before, that we knock down all of those barriers. It's a work that is ongoing, and I look forward to continuing that particular work with them. I will say this to you, that based on the conversation that I've had with regulatory bodies, I think they understand that Alberta's economy is booming, employer needs workers, and we got to work with them.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes that block of questions for the official opposition. We will now take a 5-minute break and return in 5 minutes for government caucus questions. Good. Welcome back, everyone. And we will start with a 10-minute block for government caucus members. 5 minutes, and MLA McIver, you are to start.
Thank you, Chair. I'll jump right in, and thank you, Minister, for being here and for your good answers thus far. So, Minister, as you know, Alberta's got a booming economy. That's very much thanks to the opportunities providing under our government's economic growth, and we've done more than replace the 183,000 jobs lost under the last government. So there's been some good work done in this term of office. We're one of the top destinations for immigration to Canada, and yet some Alberta immigrants have expressed concerns about proper integration into the workforce and the hurdles they have to go through to get their education and skills recognized in Alberta. On line 2.3 of page 203 of the estimates, there's $1.175 million allocated to fairness for newcomers office. And I guess since I hear for quite a bit from newcomers that can't get recognized, what work is being done to streamline and speed up the assessment of qualifications for new workers in Canada? And how are we making sure that the regulatory bodies actually meet their obligations, including their time obligations, to not play guard at the gate to keep people out, but rather welcoming force that to help people get in and then help them to either recognize the qualifications they have or to minimize the time that it takes to upgrade if they need that. I think time is of the essence. Also, on apprenticeship, of course, I don't know, this is near to my heart. My father was a welder and I was a butcher by trade, and my son's a pipe fitter currently. Although he's had a very good career, except for he was out of work for a period of time during the last government as part of the 183,000 jobs sent out. But he's sure got lots of work to do now. But what are the current number of apprenticeship seats in post-secondary institutions? On line 3.2, page 203, how many more seats will be funded with the $15 million over the next 3 years? And is the trend for enrollments up? And if not, what can we do about making it go up? I think that's we're going to need the people, not just in energy, but in a whole range of other things, construction, lots of other IT, lots of other technical things. And I guess like my question is, like, what are we actually doing, both as a government and what are we doing to encourage the private sector, hopefully with our cooperation, to encourage them to get more people into the trades, and also just to let them know from a younger age, starting in high school, that the trades are a good thing. I think it's a pertinent story that my son and his buddy in grade 12 were in a shop class, and they had a great teacher who said, "You two boneheads, got an opportunity for you. I want you to, I'm going to help you move all the rest of your classes to the morning, and in the afternoon you're going to go framing houses. And I got a crew for you, and they're going to teach you." And his buddy's a finishing carpenter now, building some of the biggest, most expensive homes in Alberta, and my son's, 15, 20 years into a pipe fitting apprenticeship, and he's got it ever increasing. So I guess that early push, that early experience, that early encouragement, are we doing anything there? So that's those are things that I think matter in terms of getting my two questions are about, one, about getting the workforce here and getting their qualifications recognized, but the other one is growing our own, getting our young women and young men started earlier if we can. Are you coordinating your efforts at all with post-secondary or even the high school departments to get people thinking about or introduced to or experiencing some of the work opportunities that this province has to offer? And of course, the more people we have working, the better, and the less people unemployed, the better. And why not here? Because this is the place where you'd make the most money in Canada on average if you do have a job. So I think I'd give you probably 5 minutes worth of material to come back at me with, and I look forward to learning something from you.
Okay, thank you, MLA McIver. And Minister, you have 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member McIver. The two questions that you asked are very pertinent questions. One that deals with our ongoing work on labor mobility, and the second part dealing with apprenticeship education and the skill trade. You know, Mr. McIver, Alberta's economy is booming right now. We have heard it from employers that their biggest need right now is labor shortage. And we know that it is not going to get any better. And so there is need for us to take a multi-pronged approach in making sure that we are doing everything we can in post-secondary institutions to train the workers of today and tomorrow, but also to make sure that those who have chosen to come to our province to fulfill their dreams are provided the support and the resources that they need. That is the whole essence of the Fair Registration Practices Act that we put in place in 2019 and the Labor Mobility Act that we put in place in 2021. You know, that act ensures that registration practices in place for regulated professions and designated trades are transparent, objective, impartial, and procedurally fair. It is critically important. We can't afford not to have the skilled workers that our economy needs. We can't afford not to have not to knock down the barriers that are oftentimes on the path of foreign trained professionals who are either coming from out of country or those who are already certified in our province but can't certified in other provinces but have difficulty coming to work in Alberta here. That is why we are working with all of the various regulatory bodies, Minister, and as you know, to make sure that those opportunities are going to be there for them. With respect to the Fair Registration Practices Act, as I indicated before, there is an audit going on with 4 professional regulatory bodies to make sure that there is a faster assessment process in place. We've made progress, and those professional regulatory bodies understand that they need to make it easier for people who want to come to their profession to make that easy transition, and that work is ongoing. The reason why we continue to have the Fairness for Newcomers, the summit, the premier summit on Fairness for Newcomers. As I said before, we had one in February of 2022. We are having one on March 17th in Calgary, where we'll bring together the leaders and the heads of the various regulatory bodies and immigration consultants, other stakeholders, newcomer serving agencies, you know, to have a dialogue on what more can we do to make sure that we continue to knock down opportunities for them. On your second question, you know, Minister McIver, you know, myself and the Minister of Advanced Education began this work in budget 2022 with the Alberta at Work program, where the government made a historic, the largest ever investment, $605 million, to make sure that we are training workers, giving them resources to upskill, you know, their education and things like that, Minister Nicolaides, and then embarked on seat expansion in critical industries across all of our post-secondary institutions. The initial target was 7,000. I think the last number that I saw was 10,000. That seat expansion continued in budget 2023. I was at NATE last week to make an announcement of an additional 1,000 seat expansion in our post-secondary institutions for the skill trade. I was in Calgary last month to make another announcement at SAIT and we continue to do that particular. Those work. I want to make sure this government wants to make sure that we have the well-trained, well-prepared workers to meet the jobs not just of today but that of tomorrow. So that work, my caliber is ongoing.
Thank you, Minister. We now move to the official opposition. L.A. Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask what this ministry's strategy is to allow new Canadians to get their credentials to practice in their field of expertise. You will know that our new Democrat government will work with colleges, polytechnics, and universities, as well as professional regulatory organizations to provide focused testing and training programs that new Canadians need to use their skills that they're bringing with them to Alberta and to Canada. We've learned from Bow Valley College in Calgary, for example, and Norquest in Edmonton. They build an innovative and targeted approach where students are attested to identify their strengths and deficiencies, and then the faculty will build a customized education program to suit their needs. A student can start working in their field of expertise in a matter of weeks or months, rather than years. So this is something that certainly we support, and I'm hoping that skilled trades and professions, would you be pursuing this as well? My second question is in regards to the page 203 of the government estimates, number 1.1, 1.2, and of course, as I said we all know that this is a new ministry, and many people would like to know how offices are structured. I noticed that the minister's office has a budget of $770,000, which I think is quite high. Other estimates that I have participated in have considerably lower office expenses, even when they're dealing with ministries with much larger budgets. So can the minister provide a breakdown of how many staff he has employed in his office, what their salaries and roles are? And just for clarity, since I guess this is a new office as well. And my third question is in regards to a question that was given to me by SAIT, and they are curious to know. This is something that I hear all the time from, as you say, the 11 colleges that you are directly related to with skilled trades and so forth, but others as well. That how do you ensure that funding for apprenticeship delivery is being delivered for that very purpose and not just being put into general revenues to bolster other programs? Now, we know that we want to maintain the integrity of the independence of our colleges to make decisions, but since you are making a lot of targeted budget announcements, I think it's fair that you should be auditing to ensure that those monies are in fact being used for exactly what you are describing them to be used for. Certainly we see colleges and universities looking for ways by which they can expand spaces, but another issue in this regard that comes to mind just from your Mr. Lovely's comments about not double counting money. I'm curious to know if these targeted initiatives that you're announcing in university schools, colleges around the province, are they built into the budget, or are they new money, right? I think we really need to know that, because I don't want people just to be re-announcing things along the way. So the initiatives that you announced, for example, in Calgary and SAIT, is that built into your budget here and now? And where does it reside? Just for the sake of clarity, I think that Albertans would like to to know that. So just in one by way of review, once again, looking for ways by which new Canadians can practice in their field of expertise, the expenses around your ministerial budget, and that we would appreciate the answers to those questions as well. We know that Albertans want an investment in skilled trades. we know that a dollar invested pays an exponential return. And certainly, if we are able to form the government here in the next couple of months, that we would invest to ensure that people can access skilled trades positions, regardless of where they live in Alberta, and that the tuition and expenses will be affordable and not an obstacle for them to get an education that they need for themselves and their families.
Thank you, MLA Egan. Minister, you have up to 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the member for that question. The member's first question deals with the minister's office budget of $770,000. And if you look at the budget document, you will find that the budget forecast for 22-23 was $313,000. I think the member knows, as he rightly noted, that this is a brand new ministry, and that was created to provide a focused attention on skilled trade and professions. So my ministry oversees the development of ministerial policies aligned with broader government-wide objectives and priorities. The budget includes salary, benefits there are 6 full-time equivalent positions in my office. The budget includes supplies and services that support the operations and the activities of the minister's office. As the member may know, he was once the minister of Education. There is always budgetary allocations for the minister's office to fulfill the responsibilities of the minister. So there is no exception here. Supplies and services generally include costs such as travel, telephone, office supplies, and things like that. And if you take a look at the breakdown of the $770,000, there is salary and benefit for 664, supplies and services at 45, and other supply at 6 to 1. That brings it to $770,000. Now, the member also talked about some of the questions that he received from SAIT. I would get back to your number one question, which is the need for new Canadians to get their credentials, but that would be my last thing I will address. So again, when it comes to whether or not, how do we make sure that the funding that we provide to post-secondary institutions are being used for that particular purpose, and to ensure that they are not being diverted to the general revenue? That is an important question, and I think the answer lies on the fact that those PSIs enter into a funding agreement, a grant agreement with the province. So there's a terms of grant agreement. They are required to report back to us, and there are performance metrics. And so I don't think we've had a situation whereby we have seen grant funding being diverted to general revenue, or otherwise that would be cut up when they report back to us. My expectation and government expectation is that when PSS apply for grant funding, that they usually specify the purpose and the number of seats and how the money should be spent. So I have no concerns with respect to all of that. Now, back to your first question, new Canadians, how do we make sure that when they come here, they're able to get into their chosen profession? That is something that is important to me, Member Egan. As you know, I was trained as a lawyer in Nigeria. When I came here about 18 years ago, I had to go through the same process again. So this is something I am very familiar with. And that is why we have in our platform a Fairness for Newcomers Action Plan. I played a role in making sure that people like myself who come to Alberta in pursuit of opportunity have the resources that they need. That is why we have the Fair Registration Practices Act. That's why we have the Labor Mobility Act. That is why we are working with various regulatory bodies, CPSA. That is why we have the triple track assessment by Connor, an investment of $250,000 to make sure that healthcare workers who are trained overseas, when they come here, that they have an easy path to get to their chosen profession. That is why we entered into the MOU with the Philippines to make sure that nurses can come here and achieve their full potential.
Thank you, Minister. We now move to Government Caucus. MLA Walker, you have 5 minutes of questions.
Well, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I've really quite enjoyed the discussion this evening, and you've just been listing off so many of the government's achievements in this, in part due to this great Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions. And again, I'm really finding it quite enlightening. I know yourself and myself and many people are passionate about ensuring people realize their full potential, including economically and professionally, in skilled trades, including, as you were just mentioning previous, with foreign qualification recognition, which is so critically important. You and I had both worked in the Labor Ministry years ago, and knowing how important this is and how it directly impacts Albertans, and especially new Albertans. So thank you so much, Minister, for the important work you're doing here in this great Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions. So my questions, Minister, this evening will focus on adult learning. I think MLA Turton had a few lines of questioning along those lines. And then also I want to circle back to apprenticeships specifically. I want to focus first on, of course, Ukrainian newcomers. We're doing so much to support them. I want to learn more about what we're doing to support them within your ministry, having to come from a terrible war-torn conflict and country due to Russia's unlawful invasion, which we all condemn strongly. But we also want to support Ukrainian newcomers who are coming here, fleeing that conflict. And there's a great long history of Ukrainian Albertans going back all the way to the 1890s. And we have a great community as well in Sherwood Park. So I'm just wondering specifically first, Minister, there has been again an increase in Ukrainian newcomers to Alberta as a result of the war brought on by Russia against Ukraine. There has also been a need for more grants to support the Community Adult Learning Program. That's what I'm focusing on here, the Community Adult Learning Program for all Albertans. So line 4.2, page 203 of the estimates shows an increase of $1.6 million for the Community Adult Learning Program. So my questions here, how will this additional funding be used to help disadvantaged Albertans? And secondly, will this mean that we will see an uptake in the numeracy and language programs? That's really critically important. We have great volunteer organizations working, I know, in the Edmonton area, including in Sherwood Park, that are helping to settle newcomer Ukrainians. And one of the big things I'm hearing for need is ESL supports and training. So I'd really like to know more about that, Minister. And then also, moving on to my second line of questioning with apprenticeship, moving to another cohort here, specifically self-identifying Indigenous adult learners who want to continue with lifelong adult learning. So the Ministry of Skilled Trades and Professions provides a variety of supports to self-identifying Indigenous adult learners and apprentices. The ministry also works in partnership with several organizations that deliver supports directly to Indigenous Albertans to encourage their participation in the trades. Now, in line 4.3, also on page 203 of the estimates, there was a 23.74% increase in adult learning initiatives here. So, since October of 2022, let's say, roughly, Minister, what grants and programs has the ministry put in place for Indigenous learners. I'm really curious to hear your answers to these two lines of questioning on Ukrainian newcomers, but also Indigenous adult learners. I know your ministry is doing so much to help all groups to remove barriers for to them to realize their potential and get fully connected and realize their dreams within Alberta and Alberta's economy. So again, Minister, just thanks so much. Really looking forward to your responses here this evening. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, MLA Walker. Minister, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Member Walker. And I do want to thank you for your years of long advocacy and good work whilst you were in the public service. I remember all of the good work you did with respect to foreign qualification recognition within the government of Alberta, and that you've continued that work as the honourable member for Sherwood Park with all of your advocacy. So thank you as well for your work. But you did ask very important question, which has to do with our support for Ukrainian newcomers in the context of the community adult learning program. I think for me and for all of us in government, it is very important that we provide all of the support that Ukrainians who have come here fleeing from the disastrous, unjust war that is being waged against their country by Russia, that support for them is critical. It is important they know that they have an ally in our government and in Alberta. Albertans have a very strong generational relationship with Ukraine. Some of the early Albertans come from Ukraine, and we need to show solidarity with them in this moment of that they need us. And that is why, remember that we have provided $16 million annually to support foundational learning opportunities and approximately $2 million in annual funding to professional development to increase their capacity to deliver quality programs. I was very happy a couple of days ago to announce a grant of $12,000 to boost to the Red Deer Public Library to help Ukrainian newcomers learn English. And this is money from budget 2022. The library's adult literacy program has seen a jump in demand over the past year, with many newcomers from Ukraine arriving in the Red Deer area, and not just Red Deer area, but across our province. These additional funds have allowed the library to add 7 more classes of 12 to 17 people and to replenish resources used by learners who work one-on-one with volunteer tutors. It's critically important. Language, being able to get employment when they come from Ukraine, English as a second language classes, all of those things are going to help them to make a fast transition. The funding that we provide support an array of services such as general equivalency diploma support, mental health, substance abuse, family violence awareness, indigenous, French and language services, diversity and inclusion programming, parenting skills, family literacy programs, job search and resume support, exam invigilation, information on post-secondary and learning opportunities, form completion support, newcomer support, you name it. We are also working with immigrant serving agencies to make sure that they have the resources that they need to continue to provide ongoing support for Ukrainians who are coming from our province. There is no question, Member Walker, that the influx of displaced Ukrainians into Alberta has added additional. We have added additional programming and support as required on a volunteer basis. But your last question deals with self-identifying Indigenous adult learners and some of the support that we have provided to them. I can tell you, member, that we have provided, beginning in 2022, our government has provided a grant of $750,000 over 3 years to support the TradeWinds Success to Training Society. This is the organization that I told you I met a couple of weeks ago, and they do important work, and I am very glad that we are supporting them. This is an indigenous-led non-profit that works with partners and industry to provide a shop experience and training to prepare indigenous Albertans for apprenticeship training. The funding creates space for 100 students over 3 years. TradeWinds to Success provide foundational and pre-apprenticeship training and support indigenous students through a network of indigenous partners, unions, and employers.
Thank you, Minister. We now go to the Opposition Caucus. MLA Gray, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. I am going to go back to a question I attempted earlier, but I might have been a little too quick with it. But essentially, I'm asking for, on page 203 of the GE 2.2 line, labor attraction, retention, and mobility. And I'm asking how it relates to the previous labor ministry line, labor attraction and retention, because while they have the same description and they have similar names, under labor it was a $4 million line, and here it's much less. As well as what's going on in that particular line item. It's also at 420,000 this year and dropping in the estimates to 170,000. So I'd just like to understand that, because under labor there was labor attraction and retention, and then there was another line for labor qualification and mobility, which had another $9 million in it. And so just trying to map where things are moving between ministries. I was hoping you could walk me through line 2.2 just a little bit more, what is coming out of that line. Similar question, labor market development agreement money flowing through the federal government. I'm familiar with LMDA money as it gets spent in the labor ministry, what it used to be, which I believe now is Jobs, Economy, and Northern Development. I was just hoping the minister could break down how the $153 million of LMDA dollars are used within the Skilled Trades and Professions Ministry. I'd just like to make sure I understand which parts of the ministry are that flow through federal funding, or I guess it may not be flow through, but you can walk me through what that particularly looks like. And I think that would be great. The other thing I wanted, and this is more of a political question, but within the business plan for the Skilled Trades and Professions, the minister's mandate so clearly speaks to supporting the skilled trades and supporting those professions. And we know that we need to do more and more training, especially with the labor shortage coming up. And just recently, the official opposition did an announcement, one of those political looking towards the election announcements, that a future NDP government would work to fund union training centers, because union training centers are provincially recognized educators like NAIT and SAIT, but they don't receive provincial funding, but they train hundreds of thousands of skilled workers. They turn out some of the highest skilled, safest workers in the trade workforce. They're well recognized, but they don't receive provincial funding. That's actually quite unique in Canada. In other provinces, they do. And so one of the things that happens in politics is good ideas belong to everyone. And when we made that announcement, I wondered if we wouldn't see funding towards union training centers in the upcoming government budget. And it appears you've chosen not to do that. So given union training centers have paid for infrastructure, the ability to skill up thousands of apprentices, and they are provincially recognized educators, this question is for the ministers. Just have you considered working with union training centers like the building trades that MLA Turton was speaking about earlier, or has that not been considered by you and your government? Because that was something I was looking for in the budget and the business plan and did not see. So Line 2.2, labor attraction, retention, mobility, trying to understand that, and if you can help me find some of the other lost money that used to be in labor, that would be helpful. LMDA spending and breaking that down within the Skilled Trades and Professions Ministry, that would be really helpful for me. I was also curious around the line item to do with premiums, fees, and licenses. I believe there was, some money here under revenue. I'm looking at page 125 of the business plan for premiums, fees, and licenses, and just not being as familiar with your ministry, I don't know what those fees are in relation to. So some of these are a little bit detailed questions, but it would really help me to understand your budget. So thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, MLA Gray. Minister, up to 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Gray, for your questions again. I think, Member Gray, as you know, to your first question, the previous Labour and Immigration Minister and the previous Jobs, Economy and Innovation Ministry were reformed to now give birth to the current Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Northern Development, and the Ministry of Trades, Immigration and Multiculturalism, and my own Ministry of Skilled Trade and Professions. So I think you are looking at line item 2.2, labor attraction, retention and mobility, and you are wondering from the previous budget, you saw a reference to $4 million in expenditure, and all of a sudden it is $170,000 here. The reform of those ministries explains that. There are a portion of the work that was previously done by Labour and Immigration that went over to the Trade, Immigration and Multiculturalism, and it does make sense that those expenditures will go with them. There are portions that went to the current Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Northern Development, that those expenditures will go with theirs. And the part that comes to my ministry, the $170,000, as I said before, essentially is meant to deal with the work we are doing around the Labour Mobility Act and things like that. So that explains that for you, Member Gray. Now, with respect to, that you were expecting to see funding for training centers. Again, I can't speak to that. We have budget 2023. I value the work of trade unions. They are vital key partners. But ultimately, I think Alberta's economy is booming right now. We are focused on creating jobs and opportunities for Albertans and making sure that the skills that our partners, employers, PSIs, and needs are going to be there for them. And if we find that it is something that is required in future, obviously we would be able to have that considerations. Currently, approximately 99% of our apprentices attend one of the post-secondary institutions, and approximately 1% of our apprentices attend a union training center. So I can't really, speak to that particular issue at this point in time. Those are decisions made by Treasury Board in budget 2023. Now, you talked about premiums, fees, and licenses on page 125 of the business plan, and I'm trying to figure out what those are. So under premiums, fees, and licenses, you have revenue generated from exam fees that are charged to apprentices when they take the Red Seal exam, and then you have recoveries from under other revenue, recoveries from foundational learning support, and then you have fees that get reimbursed back from institutions when they do not attend. But by and large, the premium fees and licenses are revenue generated from exam fees that are charged to apprentices when they take the Red Seal exam. Let me also, finally add that. Again, back to your first question. Again, though there are three ministries that has responsibility for the previous budget, that amount of money that you refer to, the $4 million, and it does make sense that some of those expenditures will go to the appropriate ministry. I hope I'm clear on that. Well, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We will go to the government caucus now, and MLA Rosewall, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I got to tell you, the questions I was going to ask were quite completely handled by the opposition, so but I do want to give you a chance to expand on it if you want. I'm trying to get a handle on the foundational learning part of things, and I see in here that it provides grant funding to students to support transition to post-secondary studies and helps them find employment. So it covers tuition fees, books, and eligible living costs. So what kind of person fits that? Like, is there an income part to this, or is it any kid coming out of high school could, like that would have been great if I could have got it, like when I went to university, but I'm just wondering who qualifies for foundational grants, and who are you trying to help? Or is it a specific group of people or not? You're spending some more money there, so I'm just trying to see if there's an answer to that. And then if you want to, if there's something you've left unsaid in the Skilled Trades and Apprenticeship Act, like that's been covered by a lot of different questioners tonight, and feel free to expand on that if you got anything left to say. So with that, I'll pass it on to MLA Allard.
Thank you, MLA Rosewell, and thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have talked a lot about skilled trades this evening, which is, I would argue, a large portion of your ministry, but professions is the other part, and I wanted to talk a little bit about healthcare professions in particular. We've all lived through the pandemic, and we learned a lot from it. I would argue that the pandemic was a highlighter, and it showed us a number of issues across government and government service delivery. And certainly it highlighted the importance of an adaptable and resilient healthcare system. And so we've seen some things that we need to do differently, and maybe we've learned about attraction and retention and how critical that is. And being from Grand Prairie with the brand new hospital, it's certainly top of mind for my constituents that we are able to staff that hospital now that we have that beautiful facility open. So, Minister, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about this challenge. We know that healthcare systems across the country are struggling to find enough staff, and I would argue probably across the world. I'm glad to see that this government under your ministry is taking strong action to resolve the shortage in Alberta, but I know that it takes time. So I want to point you to page 124 of the business plan. I think it's at the top under initiatives supporting key objectives. The second bullet says the ministry will support the implementation of the Alberta Triple Track Satellite Site Pilot Project that will streamline the licensure process and reduce the timeline for processing applications from internationally educated nurses. So I just wanted a little bit more clarity. Can you expand more on what the Triple Track Satellite Pilot Project is and how it will reduce staffing shortages in our healthcare sector in the short and medium term? And I also wanted to know if there's any way for nurses that were internationally educated that happen to already be here in Alberta or in Canada, if they can partake in that program as well. I don't have a lot of time left, but I'm going to use up my last minute, and then we'll come back to me, I guess, in the next block. I wanted then to dovetail onto that. We know that if there's a shortage of nurses, that impacts the work of doctors and vice versa. If there's a shortage of doctors, and we need an ample supply of both professions to have our hospitals and healthcare system running well. So I wanted to know, under your ministry, what is being done to ensure doctors from other jurisdictions are being licensed in Alberta by CPSA in a timely fashion and with reasonable requirements, given their training and experience, particularly, and this is a Grand Prairie example, a foreign trained physician who may have practiced in other provinces or territories for a number of years and then wants to move to Alberta, and they're being asked, in my opinion, some crazy things like, can you do an English proficiency test? But they've been practicing in a different jurisdiction in Canada for 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years. And then they come to Alberta and we put them through the ringer one more time. And I just, it's exceedingly frustrating when we look at the healthcare shortages that we are experiencing right across the country, that we can't streamline this. So I'm hoping that you have a really exciting answer for me with respect to the doctors and nurses. And finally, with my last 17 seconds, what is the Alberta government doing to knock down barriers newcomers face in order to bring in internationally trained healthcare workers in general? And that would be all allied health, not just doctors and nurses, because we know that they all go hand in glove. And with that, I will let the minister take a shot at these questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MLA Allard. Minister, you have up to 5 minutes to respond.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Member Roswell and Member Allard, for your questions. I'm going to begin with Member Roswell's question, and I think your question borders on who are the folks that benefit from Foundational Learning Assistance Grant. Broadly speaking, Member Roswell, there are folks who are underemployed or unemployed and who are looking for employment opportunities or looking to upskill their skills and looking to sharpen their skills or upgrade their education to have a better chance at finding employment. But and I think that grant is important because it creates access to adult learning opportunities and support that support this government's priorities to upskill and reskill unemployed Albertans for jobs where there is a labor market demand. That really is the focus of the grant. And we see that today as I travel across our province meeting with 11 PSIs that are our key partners. I hear that from the presidents of those institutions and the deans of colleges about the need to make sure that those fundings are there for those individuals who need a little bit help. I also hear that from places like Northwest, Northwest College, where they deal with a lot of ethnocultural people who are trained overseas. Many of whom when they come here, they struggle with language barriers, they struggle with computer literacy, they struggle with all kinds of childcare problems. So those are some of the things that this grant is meant to address. These programs help build those foundational and skills development competencies for Albertans wanting to go on to further education or to gain employment. In Budget 2023, we have the Foundational Learning Assistance Grant at $99.2 million because we believe this is a worthwhile investment. We know that there are gaps in our labor market. We know that there are labor markets, that there are job shortages. We hear from employers, mostly in the construction industry, you name it, even in the service industry, that they are short of workers. And we want to make sure that we're preparing Albertans for the jobs, not just of today, but tomorrow, but also that our better employers, our economy is able to benefit from those individuals who are unemployed but would like to get employment, or folks from our indigenous communities who face all kinds of barriers to employment. We want to help them knock down those barriers. Member Aladi talks about healthcare workers, and we saw the impact of the pandemic. It opened up and showed us the gap in our healthcare system and the need for us to work together, to make sure that we are providing the support for healthcare workers, whether they are trained here or whether they're coming from overseas. Minister, one of the things we did was to provide $200,000 to the College of Registered Nurses of Alberta for the development of an Alberta site to conduct competency assessment for internationally educated nurses. That is also why we promulgated the Labour Mobility Act to make sure that folks who are trained in this country, who work in BC, Ontario, Nova Scotia, can come to Alberta and work. That is why we put forward the Fair Registration Practices Act. That's why we're working with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta to knock down barriers. Just this morning, I read an article from Manitoba. The Manitoba government is removing a particular exam for medical doctors, and I am looking forward to learning more about that particular program in Manitoba so that we can follow suit, because we want those healthcare workers to come here in Alberta to work. I don't want them to go to Manitoba or to Saskatchewan or anywhere else. I want them to come here in Alberta.
Okay, thank you, Minister. And now we move to the official opposition caucus. MLA Egan, you may proceed with up to 5 minutes of questions.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And certainly, we all have a goal in mind, which is to make sure that Albertans have access to high-quality education and skilled trades and professions that they can use to have a fulfilling life and to help to build the economy here in the province of Alberta. What I think the difference is between our Alberta New Democrats and the UCP is that we recognize that we have to make sure the access to post-secondary and to trades and skilled trades and professions is affordable, and regardless of where you live here in the province of Alberta. And so while you might be announcing many new spaces for skilled trades and so forth in different colleges and professions, I'm noting still that, of course, we've had the highest increases in tuition in the country here in Canada. And so if you can open up all the spaces you like, but if it seems to be deemed unaffordable for people, especially young people, then they're less likely to make that choice. And so to make affordable choices, part of that, as I said before, is to expand apprenticeship certainly around the province, but to make sure that apprentices are receiving compensation for the labor that they are engaging in while they are doing that training. And so that's the big key to success to so many of our traditional trades, like plumbers and pipe fitters and so forth, is that they are getting a pay that can help them go through school. And so while they are getting their journeyman tickets, so forth, we need to expand that concept so that we have paid practicum opportunities for students, so that you're not ending up with unmanageable debts when you finish your education. As well, when you are talking about building new spaces and investing in skilled trades and so forth, you have to remember that the foundation of that system is our advanced education colleges, polytechnics, and universities across the province. And adjusting for population and inflation, which is not insignificant, we've now seen more than $1.2 billion taken out of the post-secondary system since the UCP has assumed government. And so what is needed, besides an ambitious new ministry, which, is interesting for sure, but you have to put your money where your mouth is, basically. And what we do need to do now is to repair the damage that has taken place in post-secondary right now, recognize that it's an exponential return on the dollar to repair that damage and reinvest in post-secondary in a significant way, and to make sure that we keep it affordable for all Albertans who choose to go to school and to receive upgraded training through the trades and other skilled professions. That's what a New Democrat government would do, and I'm hoping that we can manage to do so in the spirit of constructive criticism, of course, of which we always do engage these budget deliberations in. And with that, I will cede my balance of my time to my colleague.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, with the final minutes, I would ask the minister if you can just walk me through the labor market development monies, the 153 million that your ministry, I'm familiar with it in how labor used to use their LMDA money. I just want to understand in the skilled trades ministry where those funds are used. And can you talk a little bit about how you are working with health on health professions governance? And I ask because I note on page 202, which describes your role in professional governance, it's clear that you oversee the non-health professional regulatory organizations, and I imagine there's some coordination between yourself and health when it comes to the health organizations. And if you could speak a little bit more towards that, that would be helpful. And finally, metric 3B. I simply wanted to say that the number of people who have applied is an interesting metric, but the number of people who succeeded, I think, would be more valuable.
Thank you, MLA Gray. And Minister, you have up to 5 minutes for a response.
Thank you so much, Chair. And to Member Egan's question, or would say a commentary about, I didn't really see any question there. I saw a commentary about the cost of post-secondary tuition. I think, yes, I get it that oftentimes the part that led all of us here to the legislature is politics, but I think also facts do matter. And I think the facts are, let me go back a little bit. Whilst obviously I appreciate the need for us to make post-secondary affordable in our province, and I do think that we have done so. The Minister of Advanced Education have been doing a fantastic job in making sure that post-secondary is affordable and available to Albertans. And when you take a look at the average cost of tuition amongst the post-secondary institutions in our province, you will come out with one fact, and that is that Alberta is actually far more cheaper to go to university and tertiary institution here in our province than in Ontario, in BC, and in BC, and comparable provinces. Those are facts. I understand that it is an issue that is important to you, and whilst I understand the politics, but I will also caution that Albertans needs to be given the accuracy of information is important to them, and the facts don't bear out the fact that post-secondary tuition are higher in Alberta compared to comparable provinces. But we all share in the goal of making sure that post-secondary education is within the reach of any Albertan who wants to attend a post-secondary institution. That is the focus and mandate of this government. That is the focus of the Minister of Advanced Education. That is my focus as well. The reason why we have all kinds of funding, grant, bursaries, and scholarships in place in Alberta, and the reason why we've undertaken some policy reforms, to make sure that students have a breathing space in being able to pay back some of their loans and things like that. Now, and listen, again, to your question on the need to pay students when they are in the trades program. As you know, in Alberta, the majority of 80% of learning occurs on the job site, under the supervision of a journey person that acts as a mentor to the apprentice. That 80% of learning occurs on the job. It is a paid apprenticeship program. They are paid. The part that is not paid It is 20% learning that occurs in our post-secondary institutions. So again, I think it's safe to say that they are paid. It is not true that they are not paid. Member Gray asked me to walk her through the labor market transfer agreement in terms of how those costs are broken down. The labor market transfer agreement are bilateral agreements between individual provinces and the federal government. They are allocated as follows: foundational learning, community adult learning programs, apprenticeship program, and apprenticeship programs. But again, currently there are two agreements: labor market transfer agreement, workforce development agreement. As far as I know at this point in time, the labor market development agreement assists individuals who are actively receiving employment insurance, those who have had an EI claim in the last 5 years or are currently unemployed, and individuals who have paid at least the minimum employee portion of EI premiums in the 5 of the last 10 years. The Workforce Development Agreement increases the labor market participation of underrepresented groups by improving the skills levels of unemployed individuals.
Thank you, Minister. We now move to the Government Caucus for 5 minutes of questions. MLA Allard, you may start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're down to the wire here for time, so I'll be quick. I'm just looking and focusing on outcome 3. It says that on page 123, Alberta has a competitive advantage that attracts skilled workers to meet labor market demands and drive economic growth. And I just wanted to highlight that this United Conservative government has been already doing that. So I wanted to, through the chair, congratulate the minister on the work that's already been done to achieve those goals. Looking at our numbers, we're leading the country in economic growth. We're leading the country in net migration into the province. We're leading the country in entrepreneurial upstarts. It's an exciting time to be in Alberta, and so I just wanted to highlight that. But I actually wanted to reference something that MLA Gray mentioned. I too had flagged that on page 124, 3B, the performance indicator, while interesting and a gauge of sort of the level of interest to come to Alberta, and that's a helpful metric to see how it's trending. I would actually agree with Member Gray that it would be more helpful, I think, on a go forward to understand how many of those applicants actually were successful, so that we know if we're really moving the needle in terms of particularly those professions that have multiple layers of regulatory red tape and regulatory bodies to work through, to see if what we're doing is actually moving the needle for those people. But with that, Mr. Chair, because our time is short, I will cede my time to MLA Stefan.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being able to talk about trades. I have 2 sons who are currently apprenticing in the trades. Even though I have a lot of formal education, I know in my experience working as a tax lawyer, many people with great trade skills who were entrepreneurial and creative ended up being my boss, who were very successful business owners, creating a lot of jobs for individuals in central Alberta. Just before I ask a question, because I know we are short on time, I do want to comment on some of the comments the members opposite make about affordability. To me, the best way to have affordability and to benefit our post-secondary students is for them to have a job at the end of their education. And you know, when you look at affordability, it's not just a question of cost. It's also about the income that you earn when you graduate. I expect that most young men and young women who are looking at the trades look at how much are they going to make when they graduate. Because of course the investment in obtaining an education in the trades is a temporary 2 or 3 year cost. Whereas once you graduate, that income that you earn from those skills that you have as a tradesperson will be for the rest of your life. So to me, the more important component of affordability is actually the income that you earn when you graduate. And what I can say is that, Minister, I see individuals coming to Alberta. We are seeing record numbers of migration. We are seeing individuals come from not only across Canada, but throughout the world. and it's a wonderful thing. I know, Minister Madu, you are a testament of the great opportunities that Alberta has for individuals who come here and work and want to serve, raise their families. This is a land of freedom and prosperity. I just want to make, ask a question. I know that there's a 2019 report on construction trades, and it notes that only 8% of workers were positively influenced by a guidance counselor. And I guess, Minister Madu, what I want to ask is, as a guidance counselor, we often advise on what we know. And there seems to be a scarcity of guidance counselors who understand and have firsthand lived experience in the trades, so that they're able to advise on the opportunities and the great career that we have. And I'm just wondering, in terms of promoting the opportunities of trades in our schools, so that our young men and young women appreciate the great opportunity in the trades, because, often there's a lack of awareness, maybe. I'm just wondering what initiatives the ministry is making to increase the prestige, increase the awareness of opportunities of trades in our schools for our young men and young women.
Thank you, MLA Stefan. The Minister, you have just under 4 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Stephen, for your very thoughtful questions. My second daughter is in grade 9, and they have selective courses that they take. And one evening she came home and she says to me, I selected carpentry, woodwork, and I was excited. And that was long before I became the minister of this particular profession. And I was excited because I've always thought that the people that build our society are people who are able to work with their hands. And where do you find them? In the trade skills. These are complicated construction work, and that requires multitasking skills and things like that. We would not be able to maintain the highest standard of living that we have without making sure that we have our young people fully engaged to participate in the skill trade. That is why Premier Smith made this ministry a priority, to focus on the need to tackle the notion of parity of esteem that oftentimes makes it impossible for our young people to get into the skill trade. We are investing a lot in making sure that we are working with partners, industry stakeholders, post-secondary institutions, the Department of Education. I've been asking my department to look at the German model. In Germany, apprenticeship education or skill trade is part of the elementary school system. Ireland have adopted a similar. I understand Australia is also looking at the same thing. If we are going to get to the point where we completely eliminate the pride of esteem that exists between academic programs and apprenticeship programs, we have to get our young people right whilst they are in the elementary schools. And that is why I was so excited that the Department of Education, Minister Lagrange, has been working on the careers task force that will make recommendation on how her ministry, my ministry, advanced education, can work together to make sure that this is going to be part of our educational system. The reason why we have been expanding seats, historic funding, as I indicated, began with budget 2022 with our Alberta at Work program to make sure that we are working with industry stakeholders, with employers, to provide them the resources they need to attract our young people in the skill trade. Women Building Features is a classical example. They are doing an amazing work there. I want to make sure that our young women finds comfort in organizations like Women Building Futures, the organization that deals with young women within the First Nations communities. We have to work with them. In this budget 2023, there is a component of skilled training program for ethnocultural communities, because we don't want them to come here and pursue just degrees. We want them to make that particular transition to work in the skilled trade, because that is really what our economy needs at this point in time. And I'm excited, and I look forward to the work that lies ahead.
Good. Thank you, Minister. I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I would like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet tomorrow, March 14, 2023, at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Jobs, Economy, and Northern Development. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.